Today in this video, we're going to be taking a look at a 15 Stonevault run me and my group were able to complete. I believe it was last week, but in this, I just want to kind of walk through our pull cadence and how I'm using cooldowns and kind of things to watch out for. Now, this was a fairly clean run, but there were still a couple of mistakes that I'd like to point out. But getting started, we are going to do the full hallway here. Now, generally, what I like to do is I start with dampen harm to get everything kind of grouped. We get weapons of order rolling, and of course we're going into just our standard kind of AoE opener, which is like keg smash, breath of fire, keg smash, getting that weapons of order damage ramped into something like exploding keg, spinning crane kick. And then what we're really looking out for here is the arcing void casts. There isn't much we can do about the curses in particular. And then once the pull is a little bit lower, I like to Ring of Peace the mobs into the wall to keep them kind of in a static position, also getting knocked into that wall, which pretty much interrupts their cast pretty regularly towards the end of the pull, which is kind of convenient when you start to run out of kicks and stops. Now, this next pull is probably the scariest for me in this dungeon, only because we just finished up a run where we expended all of our offensive and defensive cooldowns and our kind of group healing. So this run, or this pull specifically, I'm starting with like Fortifying Brew. I have a fairly ramped Celestial Brew into a Black Ox Brew, but right now I'm really just asking for my healer to heal me at the start of this pull. Once I have some defensive cycle back up, or once mobs start to die, the damage that we're going to be taking is going to kind of thin out a little bit. We go into another Celestial Brew there. You can use Diffuse on this pull if there are a couple bolts going through onto you specifically, but the bolts can target anyone, so it really kind of just depends. But we are going to try to get the kick on Fears as well as the Arcing Void if possible, because the Arcing Void is an AoE kind of chain lightning effect. Anyways, this pull eventually goes down. Now, the reason I'm pulling them off to the side of the room here is that these pillars can be utilized for line of sight if needed by our melee DPS or any casters who find themselves in melee. But we are going to just kind of heal through that. And then we're going to grab our last two golems. Same kind of idea here. We are going to pull them off to the side of the room where melee DPS, if they would like to, if they want to try to save defensives, can use the pillars. I don't think we end up using the pillars here for any of our melee. But if you're playing with like some squishier melee, they may want to LOS, especially if you're doing a key higher than this. This is also a good pull for people just to kind of get recovery. You're going to watch a lot of my defensives kind of roll back up here. I have Dampen Harm that now has cycled back up, which we're going to be utilizing on boss. And same with our DPS as well. As you can see, though, these golems kind of slam our DPS pretty low. Once you get to a high enough key level, you definitely want to LOS. Now, one other thing that I was having issues with in this dungeon is that my health pot, for some reason, my macro, actually just my keybind, like kind of like fucked up. So what I was doing is I was readjusting my just health pot because I kind of needed it. Anyways, we're pulling Edna. Edna is an interesting boss for tanks. The biggest hit you're ever going to take in this fight is going to be the very first seismic slam, because you don't have that 50% DR that the boss gives you from the dispel. Anyways, how we're going to execute this is we're going to diffuse magic into our refracting module as well on the taunts and Swarm Lord. So I'm kind of throwing a lot of very sizable DRs at the very first slam. Once we have this dot on us, while we are going to be taking periodic damage, we want to keep this dot. Our healer does not want to dispel until the seismic slam cast starts. You're going to see this weak aura possible. It says dispel tank. This just lets me know that I'm getting dispelled. The idea for us in this key is that we do a 2-2-2 strat. So what that means is we're breaking two pillars every single time. A lot of higher healers or higher end groups have adapted to doing like a 2-0-4 split, just based on cooldown cadence. For a Resto Druid, it tends to be a little bit easier just to have the raw throughput every single time. But if your healer is struggling, if they're executing their cooldowns but they're struggling when they don't have cooldowns, it might be good to maybe do a 2-2-2 split. You can do a 2-0-4, you can do a 0-0-6 if you have a really big CD like Spirit Link, for example. But basically, you need to kind of cater it to your healer on this fight. But we've decided 2-2-2. Now, as the fight goes on, I'm going to kind of just regularly use my cooldowns for the slam, which also helps with some of the early dot damage. So I had Diffuse or Dampen Harm going here. We're going to have our Trinket cycle back up in about 30 seconds. I'm going to have Diffuse Magic in another 5 seconds. And then, of course, Celestial Brew is going to come back up as well. As a Brewmaster, there isn't much you can do here. In terms of like group healing, all you can really focus on is having solid throughput on yourself to make your healer's life a little bit easier. And the biggest thing that I'm looking out for is where these pillars are positioned. Since we're doing a 2-2-2, and our shaman is breaking, I just want to position the boss in a way where it makes it easier for our shaman to pop 2 pillars without trying to min-max his positioning as much. Sometimes the pillars, depending on how your group is stacked, can be really, really tight. We have Rallying Cry coming out here, as well as just throughput from our healer, and we're going to be pretty good. As long as you survive the initial slam, the dot ticks aren't too scary. And then this is going to be our last set. We make a audible here where it's like, well, do we tunnel or do we break the pillars to be safe? And I made the decision to just break them to be safe. We maybe could have tunneled, but I think the big slam comes out around the 5% mark, which would have been 6 stacks of the dot. So unless we had crazy immunities, it was probably better for us to just play it safe. So I'm glad we did. But this is a pretty scary break because I should have moved the boss better. But Slagavog is going to position himself perfectly to slam 2 of those pillars. And this last Earth Shatter is going to come out about the 6%, 5% mark. And then at this point, we're going to just tunnel. Luckily, we had AMZ come up. AMZ is going to help us keep us alive for those dot ticks. And then the last set of spikes. Now, at this point, if you know you can kill before the next Earth Shatter, there's no reason to break any pillars. It just makes it so your group's going to take more damage, so just don't do it. Anyways, we now have Ascendant. We have, actually, we have all our CDs. We have Wreck and Av. We have Abomination and Unholy Assault, and we have Ascendant. So we're going to do a very big pull here. So we're kind of just getting prepared. Our healer's getting a little bit of mana, making sure Flourish is available, making sure Astral Shift is available, and we're going to be pulling basically both the left and the right group. The thing we want to look out for here during the channel is going to be these Arcing Void Bolts, which we want to make sure that we're kicking. This Violent Outburst we have Flourish for, which is going to be help keep the group topped. We're also rolling all our bigger defensives. And then for me personally, I'm starting the pull with Dampen. During that AoE, I'm going to Diffuse Magic. I'm obviously rolling Celestial Brew pretty frequently. This pull is extremely deadly if you can't DPS it down this quick. Like if you look at our DPS overall, our Shaman's sitting at 9 mil, our Unholy DK sitting at 6 mil, and our Warrior's doing 4 mil. If you don't have cooldown based classes, that pull is very scary to double up, especially as a tank who can only live so long. So because that pull cost us a lot of our resources, we are now going to take this next pull and this next hallway like fairly slow until we have CDs again. When you're playing with an Ellie Shaman and Unholy DK, a lot of their damage is pushed into their cooldowns, and outside of their cooldowns, their damage is like, I don't want to say low, but it's not like Outlaw Rogue or Ret Paladin or anything like that, or In-Hand Shaman. Their damage peaks are very high, much higher than some of those other classes, but their damage lows are lower. As you can see, they're doing equal damage to the tank. So we need to kind of pace our cooldowns appropriately. So as this pull begins to die and we kick these Piercing Wails, I'm going to use Chi Burst to basically pull the next group, get some early threat, and now we're kind of getting the group together. The big thing here is looking out for these Piercing Wails. You can see here on Triangle, I just kicked it. It's from the Howler. If one gets off, it'll probably be lethal for your group at this level. If it doesn't kill you, the next one that goes off does 25% additional damage during the duration of that debuff. So make sure you're kicking that. Those are generally priority. People getting hit by Arcing Void here, people getting silenced isn't the end of the world if you're able to lock down that large group damage. So this hallway isn't really that scary. But for us, again, we just wanted to play it safe. I didn't have defensives, our healer didn't have throughput, and our DPS didn't have damage. But as you can see, as I chained there, all of their damage kind of rose back up because they had CDs come available. So as we go into this next pull, once again, we're going to take it a little bit slower until we have those CDs again. And basically, we need to watch the 2 kicks on Star and Orange, so the Piercing Wails. I have Star, our DK is watching Orange, and of course, for this Void Outburst, we need kind of throughput. So we had a Flourish proc off of the Convoke there, we had AMZ down as well, and then we know that we're probably going to get a second one, which we're going to have True Flourish for, as well as Rally. So that's what we're really just waiting for here. Now, the big thing we're looking out for is a Shadow Claw as a tank. I'm going to be trying to utilize a defensive if I can. I took that one raw, but we had a big Celestial Brew. We had Diffuse Magic available, but I'm going to be trying to hold some of this stuff for the next pull because we're going to have Ascendants come up, and we're going to have the Avatar Wreck on our Warrior, and we're going to have the Unholy Assault come up on our DK. So again, really big damage, really effective damage for scarier pulls. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the Despoiler Patrol in this room into the left pack. Now and we end up blundering this pull a little bit. On my end, I'm going to start with a Keg Smash into Breath of Fire. Actually, a Blackout Kick into Breath of Fire, it looks like. Never mind, the other way around. Swirls are very dangerous here. Arcs are also very dangerous here. And I accidentally pop up this AMD window, so I can't play the game right now. So unfortunately, because I wasn't able to hit buttons there for the brief seconds, our shaman got threat and died immediately, which sucks because it was during his ascendance, which means that this poll is going to last longer than it should have. That's kind of my bad. I accidentally fat fingered the keybind for opening up my AMD driver settings. And yeah, that's big poo-poo on my part. That's really our only big death in this dungeon that probably would cost us some time. Actually, a significant amount of time, if I'm being honest. This pole probably could have been dead already at this point, but losing a portion of that ascendance is really brutal on a class that revolves so much around big CDs. Generally, our elemental shaman is doubling our group's damage here, but he ended up being equal. Anyways, next poll, we're really just trying to lock down these speakers. We want to try to prevent anyone in our group from being silenced. The only people who it doesn't affect is our warrior and myself, but our casters and our DK definitely don't want to be silenced because it means that they can't kind of fulfill their rotation properly. Elemental does swirls, so just watch your feet. And of course, the Invader does that Arcing Void. When there's no other group damage, the Arcing Void at this level isn't that dangerous, especially if like people are kind of spread out and you just have healing going. Anyways, this poll is going to go down pretty quickly, so we're going to skip ahead to the boss. All right, now we are moving on to Skarmorak. Now, this is probably the hardest boss for us in this dungeon because our comp just isn't necessarily all that great, but I'm going to kind of walk through how we execute this. So we're going to be lusting on pull, though we're only using the Unholy DK CDs, and we're going to start with the X shard, into the blue shard, into the shard that's all the way up against the back wall. Now, the reason we're lusting on pull is because we do want to get it on cooldown, even though it's not really that great because we're not using it for all of our DPS's damage, but we want to stagger our CDs in such a way that we always have CDs, one CD going into the shield. So we're going to try to kill one shard before the slam, one shard right after the slam, and the last shard I'm going to try to cleave down with the boss. Now, it's really important as a Brewmaster monk to make sure you're bringing the boss to the shards you're trying to cleave down before he starts his channel to gain his absorb shield. Because once he gains his absorb shield, and if you're far away from the shard, if that shard doesn't die, it's probably a wipe. We bricked so many 15s at this point because we couldn't get all 6 shards down. Tank movement is really important here. I'm putting down world markers to kind of orient the room. It's really just for me. Anyways, luckily we got a good shards set here, so we're going to go X. X is going to die, we're going to go to blue, and then after this we're going to go to skull. Now, because our Unholy DK used CDs on pull, he's going to have CDs for the shield that's about to come up in about 15 seconds. Another set of lucky shards here. We have X that's going to go down, or I guess skull is going to go first, then X, and then lastly, I have Touch of Death for the last one. I make an audible call here saying I'm going to touch it. No one has to run to it. Our DK is picking up more orbs than our warrior, and he's going to blast this shell. You're going to see that it's going to go down extremely, extremely quickly here. Void Discharge comes out, and the shell is already gone just after 2 ticks. So he definitely blasted, and now our shaman is going to end up setting CDs just for boss damage here. On Ascendance. He was thinking about holding for maybe the next set of shards or the next shield, but we decided that it's just better to use it on boss damage because now Wooby, our warrior, is going to have his CDs for the next shell. So by staggering the 1.5 minute cooldowns, we're able to have a DPS with CDs for every single set. Now X dies there, and then we're moving the boss to blue. And again, I want to be very quick with the movement here because if you get an unlucky set, the boss movement could make or break the run, basically. So we're going to go X shard. As the shard's about to die, I'm going to then move the boss off to blue as soon as I can. And then once the blue shard is low, I'm going to start bringing him to skull. And this is just to really make sure we can cleave. Right now, we're still able to kill that shard while the boss is doing his fortified shell cast. And again, we have our warrior CDs here getting popped. Our shaman also has Stormkeeper. It's a little bit of single target damage there. And then after this, we are going to call a tunnel. Calling a tunnel is a little scary on this fight because you need to make sure you have the damage to actually kill the boss before his next fortified shell, because if you tunnel and he gets that shell cast off and you kill no shards, the key's going to get bricked immediately. So calling tunnel here, it's only if you truly know you're going to be able to actually kill him. Lucky for us, we were able to do about 15% before he spawned his second set of shards, and I'm also going to have Touch of Death here. So Touch of Death is going to come out very, very soon, and we're going to just call it there. So we probably had about 10 or more seconds before his next, actually probably a little bit more than that, probably like closer to 20 seconds before his phase, but we were able to get it down there. All right, so we actually, for us, that was the hardest part. We felt that the start of the dungeon from basically the when the key gets slotted to Skarmorak is the hardest point. If we make it through that, as long as we have decent timing, we should be good. Now I'm waiting to pull the next pull because the 4chans I don't want in this pack. We want to make sure we save it for the next pull. So once the patrol leaves, I'm pulling in the loader, we're watching kicks on the mender, and we're just kind of AOing the stuff down. Now there are a couple of speakers in this pull. We want to be careful of them because they just do a tank buster on the concussive smashes. That's not a big deal. Restore metals can be scary, especially if it connects with the loader. If it connects with any of the smaller guys, it's not a big deal, but making sure you can kick the restorative metals is just kind of the name of the game here. And there's nothing really to it. This pack is pretty tame. As you can see, I'm sitting on all my defensives. I'm generally playing these easier pulls just utilizing trinkets and Celestial Brew, where the larger pulls, when we're using things like Ascendance or larger CDs like Unholy Assaults or even the Warrior CDs, I want to make sure I'm saving things like Dampen, things like Fortifying Brew, things like Diffuse Magic for, so I can live and stay in the pull to maintain threat. So this next pull is going to be very scary, specifically because of these 4chans. While they do die fairly quickly, they do quickly ramp up the damage we take. Every stack you gain of their Forge debuff makes you take 5% more damage, and this stacks indefinitely. So you definitely want to kite early or when you're comfortable. So I start with Dampen. Once Dampen ends, I chain into a Fortifying Brew. We are also using Celestial Brew when we can. I'm still sitting on Black Ox if I need to. I also have Ring of Peace as a kiting method. I don't remember if I use that here. If I'm being honest, we get the Blinding Sleet. I'm at 8 stacks of the 4chan debuff, which means I'm taking 40% more damage, which can be very lethal, especially if some ally bullets fucking connect with me. Holy cow, English is hard. And that's pretty much it. So this pull goes down. It does cost me a lot of my resources in terms of my defensive capabilities, but it's good. We live here. There's one other scary pull in here with 4chans, but that was probably the scariest pull in this hallway for the tank. This patrol we are bringing into this static pack. There's a couple of Earthens and 3 Menders in this patrol, or in this pack. The patrol has a couple of speakers as well as some 4chans. So again, we're being careful about our debuff. We don't want to get our stacks to be too high. Right now we're at 2, which is the 10% damage taken increase. I do have Diffuse Magic, which I end up utilizing, but there aren't any casts that are really going on me, so it's kind of not really worth. Earthquake is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here in terms of stops, but we are also watching out for these Menders. Alloy bolts, if they all connect with the same target at once, can be lethal. And then, of course, the restoring metals can also make the pull take longer than it should. This is a pull we have wiped on before with too many bolts targeting the right people. So what we do is we're really aggressive with our knocks, our AoE stuns, our AoE stops, and our kicks. So next, I'm pulling these double Menders plus 4chan into this corner, which is 2 4chans, 3 speakers. Or the other way around? No, 4 4chans, 1 speaker. So this is probably the other scary pull in here, only because of how many 4chans there are. They end up making you take a lot of damage. You could see even at 3 stacks, I'm getting like reasonably low. I do have Dampen Harm coming up in a second. You can see here that I'm kiting a little bit. I still have access to that Ring of Peace, or it just came up, I should say, which I can utilize to kite if needed. Or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to end up using the Dampen Harm anyways. Swarmlords came up as well. And once the 4chans die, I'm going to be set. So right now, again, I'm at 8 stacks. That's 40% more damage. These things become extremely lethal. I'm now at 9 stacks. That's 45% increased damage. Again, I'm still sitting on that Ring of Peace if I need to kite, but I'm trying to... Actually, I think I'm just being stubborn here, but ends up being okay. So the reason we go this corner is because if you have a dwarf, blacksmith, or I guess any dwarf race really works, or a warrior, you can grab this anvil buff, and it allows you to have 10% versatility for 10 minutes, which is 10% damage increase and a 5% damage reduction for 10 minutes. It's going to come in handy for this next boss fight, as well as kind of the final hallway. We have about 15 minutes left, which means this buff, as long as no one dies, should last until essentially like the last boss, which we don't technically need the increase for. Anyways, I'm pulling a left side pack into this patrol, or I guess pack in front of the last boss. This isn't too scary of a pull. There are a lot of speakers which do that concussive slam, which if there's a lot of concussive slams going off at the same time and they happen to connect with you, it is scary, so definitely respect them. Here I'm rolling out to get a chi burst just so I can kite to reduce my damage as well as get off a successful chi burst. And this pull's going to go down pretty easily. And then we're moving on to kind of the last difficult boss in this dungeon. Void Speaker Eric at the very end is such an easy fight. Obviously, there's some pain points in the dungeon, or in that boss fight specifically, but this one here is the one that we're not most scared of. We feel pretty confident, but this one can go wrong because of spell queuing on the boss. Luckily, that doesn't happen to us. Anyways, we're watching kick on Brokk, and then we have Dorlita, which is the giant tank buster. Basically, we're going to rotate defensive, so either a big Celestial Brew if we have it, trinkets, or we're just going to use a defensive. Basically, each one, the first one I'm going to use Diffuse on, and then I have Refracting Module, and I also have Dampen Harm. First box goes our Nama, our Slagavog, our Shaman. He's going to be watching the kick on the far ad, and our melee are just going to focus on kicking Brokk whenever he's in melee. I pull the bosses a little bit towards the center of the room because this makes it a little bit easier to position the boss for his kind of leap away, to make sure we're on the correct side. It also makes them a little bit easier to move to the next flame gen safe spot. So that's what we're basically doing here. So we're just hitting Brokk. We want to make sure we're topped for that slam. If we're not topped or using a defensive, you're probably going to get killed in a 15. Maybe not the tank, but anyone else. Again, Tank Buster came out. All I did was I just used Celestial Brew. Celestial Brew generally does a lot of heavy lifting on the fight. So you can look at this two ways. You can either use defensives on the Igneous Hammer, or you can use your big defensives whenever you take kind of AoE damage from like flame jets or from the box exploding. I kind of just roll them out as I need. Brewmaster feels very sturdy on this fight, so I'm not really too scared. Anyways, again, pulling to the center of the room, getting in position for the next exhaust vents, and then we're able to move. Despite it being the safe spot in the same spot, we're not taking the risk. We're not trying to gamble. Being in the center of the room also removes the risk of anyone having to run super far or taking extra damage. So once those go off, again, we're going back to the center of the room, nice and easy, kicking the Molten Metal. And now we need a little bit more damage on Dorito, which is the big man. Once again, we're moving here. We're watching the frontal. We kind of baited it poorly. Brock's about to jump away. Another reason why I like to pull him into the center of the room is because Brokk is then easier to position. He will always jump to the side of the room that he's closest to. So by pulling him kind of to the middle, you can quickly transition him to either corner to make it easier for your group to get the kick, as well as make sure you're avoiding like basically the fire on the ground. This one's a little scary for us because, well, there's still fire. Obviously, that's very scary. We need to be top for this. We do have AMS. We're going defensive stance. We're sitting Spirit Wolf, and we barely survive that hit. But now everyone's nice, or I guess the bosses are nice and low, and we're going to be able to cleave these guys down pretty evenly. 2% is still a lot of health, though. We do take one tick of that enrage, and you can see it almost killed us. So luckily, we did have Touch of Death. All right, and that's pretty much the dungeon. At this point, we're feeling pretty confident. What we're going to do is, if you notice, we pulled a little bit extra in this area. So we're going to actually be doing a skip. So I want to walk you guys through the skip. It's pretty interesting. The only way you can do this is you have to have a way to drop combat. So I'm a Night Elf. If you have a Night Elf in your group, they can also do this. You don't have to be a tank. I'm just doing it because I'm probably most confident in doing it in my group. As well as being the tank, if I die, it's like, we'll just get res. We're pulling these guards, and my group, you can see in the right-hand corner, is running through. I'm now baiting their frontals, and right when their frontals come out, now they're going to be charging really far, so I'm going to just run past them, and we're going to Shadow Meld here, and that allows us to skip. Now, the other problem, though, with this is that, well, now that we skipped, we can't die. If we die, we can't run back, because I skipped this pack. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this area nice and slow. We do have Warrior plus DK CDs, so we're probably going to kill this pack pretty quickly. Now, in our previous runs, we also had Ascendance here, but we're a little bit faster than our other runs, so we're feeling pretty good. Once Ascendance comes up, I can't remember if he sends it here or if he ends up holding for the next pack, but basically, we're going to take this one pack at a time. We have plenty of time, as you can see here. We have over 10 minutes to kind of get all this trash down. The last boss is fairly quick. He's roughly a 3.5-minute fight. So we're just going to take it nice and slow. Again, if we have deaths, if we have wipes, it's pretty much going to be a dead run. So pulling him up into up against the wall makes it easier just in case the frontals do go on me. They're not going to charge that far. The guards do have a pretty nasty tank buster that you do want to be careful for. Of course, Stagger kind of carries it, but I have died a handful of times in this instance to a guard using the Stonebreaker strike on me, and it doing relatively lethal damage, especially if they cast them at the exact same time. And we're just watching in front of us. Again, we're not risking it. We're playing it nice and safe. We have tons of time. A sentence, by the way, was sent there. Now, the next couple packs are very scary for a non-prop paladin tank, basically a Brewmaster. These Stonebolts always target the tank, and they do a ton of damage. So Ring of Peace I'm going to use to get them stacked up. We're going to kick the early Stonebolts, and we're pretty much prioritizing one of the two Stone Shapers when totems are not up. If a totem gets spawned, it needs to die. If it goes off, at this level, it probably is going to be a group wipe, unless all of you have some significant CDs available, like defensives. Anyways, we are targeting down orange. You can see it's dropping much lower than everything else. And then we're going to go for the quick kill there. So this removes basically any of the threat on the tank. These Stonebolts always target their current threat target, so basically the tank. Other like Warrior, Protection Paladin can block DKs. Obviously, if they're not getting one shot by it, their Death Strike will generally counter it. But for the Brewmaster, we can't dodge the bolt, so we're pretty much taking to the face, and our stagger is less effective against magic damage. So that is one of these are the scarier pulls in here for the tank specifically. Despite some of the earlier pulls being deadly because of a lot of different modifiers being applied and tank busters going on, these bolts aren't really tank busters. They just fucking hurt. And Brewmasters don't have a good kit to deal with them. So essentially it's kicks, making sure you're prio damaging them down. When you do have to run away from the Smasher when he spawns giant swirls on the ground, making sure you're utilizing CC, things like Ring of Peace, things like Leg Sweep will come in handy. And I think I showcased that in one of the next pulls where we have to move out, and what I do is I end up just CCing the mob. When there's one left, it's fine. It's when there's double bolts going off that it becomes really, really dangerous. One other thing we need to keep in mind with this Smasher is that he does do a lot of AoE damage and also displaces the group with his knockback. He also applies a debuff to people that makes them take more damage for every subsequent smash rock. So ideally, we don't necessarily chain as much as we do in here. We still have 7 minutes left, give or take, and we're going to do this kind of last 2 pulls here. So what I'm doing is I'm pinging one of the Stone Shapers, and that's the one that we're going to prio down. I'm just waiting for a little bit of mana here. We're waiting for CDs to come back up, and then we're going to head in. The big thing why we're waiting there, though, mostly was because we killed that Smasher at the very end of the pull. He did one last smash, which extended our buff or reset our buff. We wanted that to drop before we pulled, because then this Smash Rock would probably just kill us. So unfortunately, it was a little slow on our end, or maybe a little fast. I'm not really sure. I roll out here and I get a Leg Sweep, so they're not bolting me. And then we're going to get a Shockwave back into basically kicks, which that Blinding Sleet just ate. But that's okay. With the Sins being proc there, we were able to kill that very, very quickly. And with that Smasher going down, it's going to finish off our trash percent here. So we're going to be heading into Void Speaker Eric. So Void Speaker Eric is pretty much, I don't know, he's such a simple fight. It's such an anticlimactic finish to a dungeon. As most of you know, he does a frontal. It targets a random player. It basically tries to punish anyone who's far out from him, so you definitely want to stay in melee. Our strategy is just to tank him in the middle of the room. This is pretty common. And basically our range are going to pre-position near the void rifts, and then our melee are going to run out towards the new spawning ones. And the tank, as in myself, I'm going to hold, and I'm going to just drop a little bit later in the fight. Tanks, there's no tank buster or anything like that, so using defensives definitely allows you to hold. In lower keys, anything really lower than a 15, what I end up doing is I generally just hold the debuff for a lot longer. But because we were here, because we were on a good pace, I just wanted to drop just to drop to make our run as safe as possible. So again, our range are dropping almost immediately, and then our melee are basically going to follow. Once I see a fit opportunity to drop, I generally will. But if I need to hold, I will. And that's really it. Like, this fight it's just kind of boring. I believe we do end up having one death on accident. I don't remember exactly why we had a death. I can't remember if it was like a miscommunication about portals or just like bad like poop positioning, I guess. But Whenever these Void Corruptions come out, our priority is basically range DPS and healer, followed by melee DPS, followed by tank. Pretty simple. This fight is a lot easier for range, I find. While you do have to generally dodge the frontal more often than not, melee have to run out so much more often, which can be obnoxious. So right there, kind of scary moment. We kind of weird bait at the frontal too. That's the one thing you can do as a tank. It can target the tank, so try not to bait it at your range. I should be more aware of where, our shaman and our druid are spawning, and definitely try not to aim it, obviously, at a portal. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So what's cool about a tank, though, is you can definitely try to stack up your poop on the ground whenever that Unbridled Void comes out. Or no, sorry, Entropic Reckoning, I believe it's called. But yeah, this fight is very, very boring. So I don't really know what else to say. Let me fast forward a bit. And then I think this is where the death will probably happen. Somewhere around here. Yeah. So he tried leaping to a portal and ended up getting clipped by the poop on the ground. So just want to be careful on that. Sometimes with your poop placement like this, we created a really big wall, which can definitely be punishing for melee people. You kind of want to drop pools more or less stacked either against the edge, or you want to keep them stacked like I'm about to do here. So you create these like little avenues for people to walk through to get to the portals, to the rifts. But outside of that, we only had 2 deaths in this run. I think that one on our warrior there on this pole wasn't necessarily game-changing. I don't think it made us lose that much time outside of the death. I think Nama's, our shaman's death earlier in the run was definitely costly because obviously him losing Ascendance is really big damage. Anyways, that was the run. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.